This 42nd general election saw Ontario's Kathleen Wynne campaign for her federal Liberal leader more than any other premier in at least 3 decades has. And it worked. Ontario delivered 80 seats to the federal Liberals. Joining us now for what that might mean to the province, we welcome back former Liberal Cabinet Minister Greg Sobera, flanked by former PC Cabinet Minister Janet Ecker, former NDP Cabinet Minister Francis Lankin, and the Toronto Star's Martin Reg-Con. Let's look at a couple of maps before we start here. Shall we bring these ones up? Here's the province of Ontario on election night. And this map doesn't completely indicate what happened because, frankly, there's just not enough red because a lot of the small ridings went red. If you flip it over and look at the Greater Toronto Area, yeah, that says it all. There's a lot of red, 3 patches of blue, and no orange at all. It was a massive Liberal sweep in the Greater Toronto Area. And I guess I want to know, Greg, off the top here, how much credit is Kathleen Wynne entitled to take for the fact that Justin Trudeau won 80 seats in the province of Ontario?
I don't think she's going to take credit, but I think she was part of the recipe. First thing is, I think it was a very courageous move on her part. And my advice to her early on in the campaign is, what the hell are you doing?
So you said keep your head down.
Well, here was my concern was Stephen Harper might win. And he's got a very long memory, and he can be vicious in political reprisals and don't put Ontario at risk. But it was courageous, and I spoke to her after the election, and I said that was a very courageous thing to do. I think it added to the overall impact, particularly in that map of the Greater Toronto Area, which is really the core of Kathleen's support. But, you know, remember that Justin won all of the Maritimes, and Kathleen wasn't campaigning out there. There was a mood across this country to get rid of the incumbent prime minister and his party, and Kathleen was aware of that, and she felt it personally as well. She said to me, my relationship with Stephen Harper couldn't get any worse.
So why not?
We need to change the government, so why not get out there and help change the government?
Nobody in 3 decades, I hearken back to the days when Bill Davis was out there stumping for Brian Mulroney and Joe Clark and Bob Stanfield before that, no Ontario Premier has gotten this deep into a federal campaign since those days. Is Kathleen Wynne entitled to take some of the credit for the way Ontario turned out?
Well, I think it certainly did contribute, but I think, as Greg said, there was a lot that contributed to Justin Trudeau's win. I mean, his performance on the hustings, the campaign they ran, I mean, there was a lot of things that contributed to that victory. So it was part of it. I mean, we can see what happens when the Danny Williams, as he did in the Maritimes, you know, campaigned against Harper, and they lost their seats pretty well. So it can have an impact. In this case, it did have an impact, I think, but it isn't the whole story.
Sure.
And I don't think, and it was risky for her to do it. One of the things about politics is you learn very quickly is it can always get worse. So, you know, it was a risk on her part, but we'll see if it really, really pays off, because one of the challenges for a Prime Minister of Canada is that the rest of the country gets very, very cranky when they think you are giving Toronto or Ontario special treatment of any kind, whether you are or not. So even with what you know, people may think there's a big IOU to the Premier, I think...
well, hold off on that.
Okay.
We're going to get to the IOUs in a second. How do you read it?
I'm not as convinced as my colleagues about it. I think that Kathleen is a mixed blessing right now in Ontario. There, I think, are progressive voters who feel very strongly that she is part of a new, you know, Liberal regime, and Justin and the folks around him are part of that as well. And I think many of those progressive voters would be influenced by her. But I think the larger issues, when you say it's not, you know, the whole recipe, I think the larger issues were much larger. I think not just the, you know, the intent to defeat a government, which is often, you know, what brings about these kinds of sweeps. I think the people's attempt at strategic voting, which took out some very good people in situations where it didn't need to, because there wouldn't have been a Conservative member elected there in any event, including some new Democratic incumbents, like you showed in the Toronto area. And I think you can't underestimate with that strategic voting mindset, the decline of the momentum of the NDP after the niqab issue and other things took hold. And, you know, I feel very sorry for what I think was a really great NDP campaign. And, you know, we say we want principled politicians, and here we had a principled politician, and essentially the tide turned against that
We want them. We don't always reward them.
We don't always reward them.
Yeah.
I guess that's the way it goes. Yeah.
But hang on, Justin Trudeau, I'm not trying to defend him here, but he had an identical position on the niqab. So he was equally principled, but he didn't take the hit. So there was something about his...
niqab here, though. Let's get
Good
back
idea.
to
Good idea, thank you.
But Martin, I do want you to speak to why you think Kathleen Wynne made the decision to basically buck 3 decades of tradition in the province of not getting involved deeply in federal campaigns by getting deeply involved in this one.
Well, Greg called it courageous. I would call it crazy courageous, because not only did she risk antagonizing Stephen Harper, and I agree, you couldn't get much slower, but I agree with Janet too, that you never know, it could get worse with Stephen Harper in particular, who didn't speak to her for a year. But she also snubbed Tom Mulcair, who at that point in the campaign had a very good chance of becoming the next Prime Minister of Canada, at least through a minority. And I thought that was goofy on her part. I thought that overstepped, frankly, if we want to replay history. Her motive, I think she is, we forget, except in Sudbury, that she is fiercely partisan. It's in her blood, it's in her bones, and she projects this kind of calm, Buddha-like, I'm a mediator persona, but inside is a very fiercely competitive person.
Win.
Yes. I think she's a real liberal, like this person in the middle here. She just is very competitive that way as well. So I think in that sense, she we joke sometimes, vote early, vote often. She endorsed early, and she endorsed often. She kept at it. Was there causality? No, I think it's more a matter of loyalty. That kind of intense loyalty deserves some kind of, if not reward, recognition.
Well, that very nicely segues us to where I want to go next, because there is an assumption that as a result of the efforts the Premier of Ontario undertook for her federal leader, that the next time she goes to, it's not going to be 24 Sussex. Where's it going to be now? At the Rideau Cottage? The Rideau Cottage?
One Sussex. One
Sussex, okay. That she's going to walk in with a checklist saying, okay, I did for you, now I want help on this, on this, on this. Is that how it works?
No, I don't think that's going to happen. In fact, I'm not. I don't completely agree with Martin that it's all about, she's a very strong partisan. Kathleen really believed right to the core of her heart that the Harper government was very bad business for Canada and very bad business for Ontario. So, essentially, she's got her reward already. The Canadian government is going to change. There is going to be a different style of government. There is going to be an open phone line between 24 or 1 Sussex and Queen's Park. They're going to be together today at a memorial service. They will answer each other's calls. They will start to work together. And that, in Ontario, after 9.5 years of Stephen Harper, is a great win.
No, I get
so
you.
is there going to be, you have to build this road, or you have to build that hospital, or you have to help us out on pensions? I don't think there's a shopping list. I think what there is an agreement to try and cooperate in the best interests of not only Ontario, but the entire country. So that's the reward, and that's a big reward.
They did meet today, and they, I suspect it was more of a courtesy call at Queen's Park, and then they did attend the Ken Taylor funeral as well. Having said that, everybody assumes that Kathleen Wynne went to bat for Justin Trudeau because he's going to help her get stuff done in Ontario that Stephen Harper wouldn't. Now, she says that's not a transactional relationship, but that sounds like a transactional relationship. Is it not?
It doesn't to me, actually. No, I believe that they have a lot of concerns for our country that they share in common. And they share in common with a large base of Canadians, Liberals and New Democrats, and some progressive Conservatives as well. And I think that those list of things that they have in common, and you can look to pensions, you can look to infrastructure spending that was part of Justin Trudeau's campaign.
Cap and trade?
Absolutely.
Maybe.
Those things will be natural points of common discussion. There's also the fact that key advisors, absolutely key advisors around Trudeau, were part of the Ontario government and have been part for a long time of bringing a lot of us together from sectors to fight for a fair share for Ontario. So if Trudeau presents a picture of a person who is very much interested in equity and in fair treatment, then Ontario should see better days ahead. And I think, Kathleen is committed to that, and I think that Justin is committed to that. Isn't that nice? We have a premier. Jeremy said this to me before the show. We have a premier and now a prime minister that you can call by their first names. I like that.
The country's in good shape. The clouds have lifted.
Okay,
All unicorns and rainbows, violins playing.
That was one of the best lines.
Yeah.
I suspect you're not going to go on the record here and say Ontario's better off now that Stephen Harper is gone. Having said that, there is these two are, I'm not going to call them by their first names, but the new Prime Minister and the current Premier are very personally simpatico. There's no question about that.
Absolutely.
Both on issues and in temperament and in the fact that they just kind of like each other. Shouldn't the province benefit as a result of all of that? Isn't that likely?
Well, actually, for a historical fact, Chrétien with Harris, Chrétien turned down things for Ontario just because he and Harris didn't get along. So it's not unique to the Harper government. But I think she does have a right to expect that she will get something or a list of things, and I would be very surprised. She probably wasn't so crass as to go in with a list, but I would be very surprised if there isn't a list somewhere.
What should be at the top of it?
Well, I think, and again, I don't doubt her passion and in terms of why she was motivated to do what she did, but I certainly think that if you're going to invest that much of your political capital, and yes, it can be a mixed blessing, but if you're going to invest that much on behalf of another politician, if you're going to take that kind of crazy risk, as you said, a crazy courageous risk, you have a right to expect something back. So I think infrastructure, I think taking another look at equalization, fair share payments, I think are two. I think looking at how funding for health and social, there's a lot of long issues, that list of issues that I think should be looked at. But probably one of the first ones will be infrastructure. There's no doubt we need infrastructure spending in Ontario, and the current provincial government is doing, trying to do a lot of that. But the second issue, actually, which I should have mentioned earlier, is the Ontario Pension Plan, because that proposal can be quite, trying to do that on just one province basis.
So if Justin Trudeau improves the CPP, you think Wynne will take it off the table? The Ontario plan?
The messages have been a little mixed. She should.
She
The messages are a bit mixed. I hope that's what that means, but we'll see. So
that would be the best
timing
solution.
issue.
Could be.
But I think it's a sad state of commentary on the nature of politics if we think that the new Prime Minister, who put forward a number of platform issues that are important for the people of Ontario, would only carry through on those promises because he owes the Premier something because she was out on the hustings. Right. I actually don't believe that it works quite that way.
He'd do them anyway, is what you're saying.
If he keeps his promises.
Because he believes it. Okay, we got a couple of minutes here, and I know you want to make a point, but I'm running out of time, and I want you to speak to this. Was it 11 years ago, we had a Liberal Premier of Ontario in Dalton McGuinty, we had a Liberal Prime Minister in Paul Martin, and a lot of people who thought, because they're in the same party, everybody's going to sing Kumbaya, were surprised at how badly those two got along. And in fact, a lot of Martinites blamed you, yes, you and your 2004 budget for the fact that they lost so many seats in Ontario. Is this a cautionary tale of Trudeau and Wynne, watch what you wish for, because you never know?
No, I don't think so.
You don't
Good
see
question,
that.
but I think, look, there's not just personal chemistry, there's not just IOUs, there's even political congruence, but it's not just that. It goes beyond that. It goes to their staff. I mean, most of the campaign managers in Ontario came from the Ontario Liberal machine. The guy who, we talk about debts, there's an $11 billion equalization fiscal fairness issue here. The guy who wrote the book on that for the Mowat Institute, Matthew Mendelson, wrote the federal Liberal platform. The press secretary for Kathleen Wynne at today's meeting with Justin Trudeau was one of his press secretaries during the federal campaign on secondment. These two are now joined at the hip.
Gerald Butts.
Not necessarily
Gerald Butts, of course.
Gerald Butts, who was Dalton McGuinty's main policy advisor and talked about fiscal fairness, is also Trudeau's now main
But where
advisor.
you stand depends on where you sit, and they all sit in different chairs now.
Yes, and this country is all about the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and there are other provinces that squawk a lot louder than Ontario. So I think Kathleen Wynne knows that. She's realistic, but there is an alignment in terms of ideas, in terms of staff, and not necessarily on pensions, by the way, and that's for another day perhaps. I don't think you're going to see the Ontario plan folded into a CPP yet because Ontario's way ahead, and that'll take more time.
Let me give Greg the last 30 seconds here. You know that the press gallery is going to be looking for the first sign of discord between Trudeau and Wynne. How would you advise her to handle that when it happens? Because it will happen. It's inevitable. They're not going to agree on 100% of things.
it should be handled diplomatically. Let's remember that Justin, you can call him Justin, has got commitments all over the country. And, you know, Ontario has been, has not done well under Stephen Harper, but go to the Atlantic provinces. I mean, things are tough there. They're really tough. And, you know, there's 32 seats to show how bad things had gotten with the Harper government. So I think his responsibility is to make sure that, notwithstanding Kathleen's good work in the campaign, that there are issues all over the country. Now, you know, there will be some friction, but I'm convinced that we will see over the course of the next 4 years the very best relationship between Ontario and the federal government as we have seen in really decades.
We'll come back and have you talk about it as the story unfolds. Thanks, everybody. Good to have you all on TVO tonight. Good.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.